Imagine standing amidst a bustling Parisian square, the crowd's whispers swelling into a deafening roar, thousands of eyes fixed on a towering wooden machine glistening ominously beneath the midday sun. A blade, sharp enough to sever life in an instant, hovers high above, awaiting its moment of release. The tension is palpable, heartbeats synchronized in collective dread and anticipation. This isn't merely a scene of medieval barbarism. This is the guillotine, a chilling invention that changed history forever. But how did such a brutal device come into existence, and why was it eventually banned despite its swift and supposedly humane design? Our story begins in 18th century France, an era marked by stark contrasts. Lavish wealth brushing shoulders with desperate poverty, scientific enlightenment clashing fiercely with archaic brutality. Public executions were common spectacles, but their methods, hanging, beheading by axe or sword, and burning, often grotesquely flawed, prolonging suffering in ways that horrified even the hardened populace. It was in this turbulent context that Joseph-Ignace Guillotine, a respected physician and member of the Revolutionary National Assembly, proposed a radical reform. Ironically, Guillotine himself was neither executioner nor sadist. His intention was compassion. He dreamt of a method of execution that was swift, painless, and equitable, removing the gruesome class distinctions from capital punishment. In 1789, amidst the thunderous echoes of revolution, Guillotine passionately argued for equality, even in death. "With my machine," he famously declared, "I shall make your head fly off in the blink of an eye." Though meant humorously, Guillotine's proposal resonated deeply with an assembly eager for symbols of equality and Enlightenment rationality. But Guillotine himself never invented the guillotine. That honor belonged to Antoine Louis, a skilled surgeon whose precise engineering brought this terrifying concept to life. Collaborating with Tobias Schmidt, a gifted German craftsman, Louis meticulously refined the design. Their goal was grimly scientific: minimize suffering through maximum efficiency. By 1792, the guillotine stood ready, a formidable yet chillingly elegant apparatus. Its blade, angled sharply at 45 degrees, weighed 88 pounds, descending in less than half a second. Its debut victim, convicted thief Nicolas Jacques Pelletier, met his swift fate on April 25, 1792, before an awestruck crowd. Witnesses were stunned. It worked precisely as intended: swift, clinical, terrifyingly efficient. What was intended as humane soon transformed into a symbol of revolutionary terror. France, seething with political upheaval, embraced the guillotine not merely as a tool of justice, but as a weapon of power and intimidation. Enter Maximilien Robespierre, whose reign of terror from 1793 to 1794 would indelibly associate the guillotine with mass execution and fear. Public squares across France, particularly Place de la Révolution, today's Place de la Concorde, became theaters of death. Thousands met their end beneath its blade, including King Louis XVI, Queen Marie Antoinette, and ultimately Robespierre himself. The guillotine's blade did not discriminate by status, confirming Guillotine's grim promise of equality in death, yet plunging France into paranoia. Its relentless rhythm, blade rising, blade falling, became a chilling soundtrack to revolutionary fervor turned frenzy. As the French Revolution ended and France emerged into the 19th century, the guillotine remained, woven deeply into the fabric of justice. Public executions persisted, becoming macabre spectacles attracting enormous crowds, selling souvenirs, food, and postcards, capturing the grisly events. The irony wasn't lost. A device conceived in enlightened compassion had become an instrument of public entertainment and morbidity. Critics began voicing ethical concerns. Was society losing its humanity, reveling in death rather than justice? Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, as other nations abandoned public executions in favor of hidden chambers and less dramatic methods, France clung stubbornly to tradition. Remarkably, the guillotine remained France's official method of execution until 1977. Its use became rare, reserved only for the most heinous crimes. The last victim, Hamida Jandoubi, executed for torture and murder, met his fate quietly at Beaumet's prison in Marseille, a somber event, devoid of spectacle, yet no less chilling. By the late 20th century, shifting moral values and growing international criticism pushed France towards abolition. The guillotine, once revolutionary and progressive, now stood as a haunting reminder of human brutality. Its swift precision no longer masked its symbolic violence. Finally, in 1981, under President François Mitterrand, France officially abolished capital punishment, retiring the guillotine forever. But why, after nearly 2 centuries, did society reject this method so vehemently? The answer lies in evolving ethical perceptions. The guillotine, despite its swiftness, came to represent something fundamentally repugnant: the mechanization of death. It stripped humanity from the condemned, reducing execution to a clinical act that paradoxically magnified its brutality. Psychologists, philosophers, and activists argued convincingly that the device, in its stark impersonality, revealed a darker truth about human nature, our capacity for detachment from suffering under the guise of justice. Furthermore, the guillotine became politically untenable. It was an embarrassment internationally, seen as barbaric by a world moving towards more humane penal systems. Public opinion shifted dramatically, driven by growing awareness of human rights and dignity, even for criminals. Society began questioning not only the method but the morality of capital punishment itself, sparked by extensive advocacy and public debate. Moreover, disturbing scientific studies raised unsettling questions about the guillotine's humane claims. Reports suggested a brief period of consciousness after decapitation, terrifying seconds where the condemned might remain aware, eyes opening, expressions of shock and pain frozen horrifyingly upon their faces. The implications were profoundly disturbing, shattering the belief that the guillotine provided instant oblivion. Today, the guillotine endures in popular culture as a potent symbol, a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both rational compassion and calculated cruelty. It haunts historical memory, prompting endless debate on justice, humanity, and the limits of punishment. Museums and exhibitions display the guillotine solemnly, visitors often walking away profoundly disturbed, forever questioning society's complicated relationship with justice and violence. Ultimately, the guillotine's legacy is complex, conceived with noble intentions but executed with ruthless efficiency. Its rise and fall mirror humanity's ceaseless struggle to balance justice with compassion, punishment with dignity. The banning of the guillotine didn't just signify the end of an execution method, it marked a profound shift in societal values, a rejection of the brutal efficiency that once seemed enlightened, and a reaffirmation of our collective humanity. As the blade now rests, silent and motionless, it whispers a cautionary tale through history, warning us forever of the thin line separating justice from barbarity. The guillotine's ominous presence lingered long after its blade ceased to fall. As a silent spectator to history, it had witnessed humanity at its best and worst, serving as both an agent of enlightened reform and a ruthless tool of oppression. But what truly cemented its banishment into historical obscurity was the unsettling revelation of the psychological toll it inflicted, not just on its victims, but on society itself. Public executions, once thought to deter crime, instead seemed to perpetuate a cycle of fascination with violence. The guillotine's clinical efficiency paradoxically amplified this morbid curiosity, making death seem too simple, too sterile, and yet unbearably real. As historians began to revisit this era with critical eyes, Another troubling facet emerged. The spectacle of execution had blurred lines between justice and entertainment. Accounts from the 19th century described vendors selling miniature guillotine replicas, sweets shaped like decapitated heads, and even guillotine earrings, a grotesque commercialization of capital punishment. Society had, perhaps unintentionally, transformed tragedy into spectacle, mourning into amusement. This trivialization deeply disturbed thinkers and activists, prompting fierce debates on the ethical responsibilities society held towards even its worst criminals. The growing humanitarian movements of the late 19th and early 20th centuries found ample fuel in these ethical dilemmas. International advocacy against the death penalty gained momentum, supported by influential intellectuals like Victor Hugo, who vividly captured the moral contradictions of capital punishment. Hugo passionately argued that society's moral authority was undermined by state-sanctioned killing, no matter how swiftly or painlessly it was administered. His words resonated deeply, seeping into public consciousness, challenging people to question not only the means of execution, but its very justification. The post-World War II era further catalyzed the movement against the guillotine and capital punishment generally. Humanity had witnessed atrocities on an unprecedented scale, prompting global reflection on human rights and the sanctity of life. As international laws and conventions began emphasizing dignity, human rights activists drew uncomfortable parallels between the guillotine and other forms of state-sanctioned violence. The irony became painfully clear. Methods initially intended as humane solutions were now symbols of institutional cruelty and moral failure. Scientific inquiries into the actual experience of decapitation also emerged, providing harrowing insights that contradicted earlier assumptions of instantaneous death. Studies conducted in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, including grisly accounts from executioners and medical professionals, painted haunting portraits of prolonged consciousness post-decapitation. Eyewitness testimonies describe disembodied heads displaying signs of awareness, blinking, mouthing words, expressions of fear etched deeply into their final moments. Though debated, these accounts shook public confidence in the guillotine's supposed humanity, dismantling the comforting fiction that death by its blade was swift and merciful. Moreover, psychological research began exploring the deeper impacts of execution on executioners themselves. Interviews and memoirs revealed troubling emotional and mental scars carried by those who operated the guillotine. Far from detached efficiency, executioners recounted nightmares, depression, and moral torment, unable to reconcile their roles with personal ethics. This further dismantled the illusion of the guillotine as a compassionate tool, forcing society to confront the complex web of suffering it wove, extending far beyond its immediate victims. In response to these revelations, influential advocacy groups intensified their campaigns against capital punishment, using the guillotine as a central symbol of systemic cruelty masked as humane justice. International pressures, particularly from human rights organizations like Amnesty International, began bearing fruit in Europe and globally. France, a nation priding itself on liberty and enlightenment, increasingly found itself isolated in its continued use of the guillotine. International criticism portrayed France as stubbornly archaic, clinging to an outdated symbol of authoritarian brutality. Political leaders, sensitive to international image and public sentiment, began voicing support for abolition. President François Mitterrand's 1981 campaign leveraged public dissatisfaction and moral outrage effectively, promising abolition as a cornerstone of progressive reform. Upon his election, Mitterrand swiftly delivered on his pledge, ushering in a new era marked by humanistic values. The abolition wasn't just political, it reflected deep societal introspection, signaling France's definitive break from its violent past towards a future grounded in universal human rights. The guillotine's abolition was met with widespread international approval, symbolizing a significant victory for global humanitarian movements. France's decision emboldened other nations to reconsider their own practices regarding capital punishment, reinforcing the global trend towards abolition or humane penal reforms. The guillotine's retirement thus resonated far beyond French borders, amplifying discussions worldwide about justice, humanity, and the state's moral responsibilities. Today, the guillotine continues to captivate public imagination precisely because of its troubling contradictions. Museums around the world house replicas and original guillotines, their stark presence prompting somber reflection on humanity's capacity for both innovation and cruelty. Literature, cinema, and popular media frequently invoke its haunting imagery, underscoring society's ongoing struggle with punishment's ethical complexities. Each depiction renews public debate, reminding us of the thin veneer separating civilization from savagery. Ultimately, the guillotine's banning signifies more than merely discarding a method of execution. It represents humanity's ongoing endeavor to redefine justice and morality. Its invention, born from noble ideals, underscores the tragic paradoxes inherent in human progress. The guillotine, in its stark efficiency and brutal impartiality, forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about itself, catalyzing profound shifts in legal and moral philosophy. In retrospect, the guillotine's rise and fall offer poignant lessons. It reminds us that progress isn't linear or unambiguous, often fraught with unintended consequences. It highlights how noble intentions can inadvertently manifest into instruments of oppression. The guillotine challenges contemporary society to remain vigilant against new forms of institutional cruelty disguised as humane reform. As we reflect upon this chilling chapter of history, the guillotine's blade, forever stilled, continues whispering cautionary tales. Its legacy prompts continuous scrutiny of our methods and motives, urging society towards empathy, restraint, and humility. The banning of the guillotine symbolizes not only the end of a violent era, but also humanity's relentless pursuit of a more compassionate justice. This stark symbol of our past thus becomes a beacon guiding future generations, reminding us always of our profound responsibility towards dignity, life, and ethical governance.